And the next stop on the Purdue Redemption Tour is the Final Four.
More in motion, they get it to him. More in space. Close to speed. A touchdown for Purdue. He's still going.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Wash Boilers. Today we're going to be going over some recent news, some Purdue schedule updates, and some out-of-conference opponents since 2021. First off, I want to give Eich a chance to go over the not washed boiler of the week. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so the not washed boiler of the week is Mitch Daniels. That's right, Mitch Daniels is back as interim Purdue president after the departure of Mung Chang. So welcome back, President Daniels. I know it's only on an interim basis, but cool to see him willing to step back into the saddle and guide Purdue as we try to find our next president. So Mitch Daniels, not washed boiler of the week.
It's a great first guy, I think, to have. Hopefully he can get us back to some good football. That's all I'm hoping for.
So in other news, on the basketball side of things, Oscar Clough actually got a pre-draft workout with the Golden State Warriors. So we didn't really mention him when we were talking about kind of best NBA fits for Purdue seniors last year. One of the main reasons for that is, unlike Braden Fletcher and TKR, he didn't get a combine invite to either the G League or the actual NBA one. So besides that, really cool to see that the NBA dream is still potentially alive for Oscar Clough, and maybe we'll have to take a look at if the Warriors are a good fit for him.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. A lot of the analytical accounts I follow on Twitter and stuff have had kind of him as a higher rank than TKR, but I always thought it was weird because I didn't think he showed any interest. And we talked about it a number of times that he's probably going to end up playing in the Australian League anyways, even if he doesn't go to the NBA. So it didn't even come to mind that he get a workout. But it feels like the Warriors are kind of a sneaky pipeline that we've wanted for Purdue guys, with Travion being the first guy to go there, or just wanting to go there.
Yeah, no, that 2022 draft when Travion declared, I don't think he was drafted, but I think he did end up signing with their summer league team as his first team, and that was an all-time I wanted this guy to end up there moment. Defending champions at that time too. I thought he was like the perfect mini Draymond Green for them, and didn't turn out like that. But maybe Oscar Clough, because I feel like I understand why. I'm not too far into all the analytical stuff, but I could see where Clough could be an intriguing prospect, especially 6'11", so he does have that size. Obviously, there's going to be concerns that on the perimeter he's too slow and he's just not athletic enough for the NBA, but he was a great rebounder last year, and kind of like we mentioned with TKR, and really showing out at the Michigan game and that being a reason where maybe he could fit in the NBA. Clough probably should have been the MVP of the Big Ten tournament, and Braden was great and he was deserving as well, but a lot of people were saying after that Clough could have won that MVP. So if he can compete against a team that's probably going to have 3 lottery picks, I don't see why he couldn't carve out a role in the G League or in the NBA itself.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like he was such a huge part of the Big Ten tournament run. He's easily our second best player, if not the best player at points. So I definitely could see him fitting into type of a regular season. The regular season NBA versus playoffs is just so different. His perimeter defense is such an issue. I would be curious how he could clean that up in the league. But regular season, I don't see why he couldn't play some off the bench minutes and, be a really good defender in the paint. Because that's there's so many good centers in the league right now. You kind of need someone like that to just pick up minutes. There's not a lot of centers to go around at this point.
Yeah, I thought you were about to check in at the end of the Cavs-Knicks game. I had no idea who the hell was even on the court with that. So I think Tyler Kolek was there. If those guys can play in the NBA, Clough and the rest of the other seniors, they have a role. I'm pretty confident. So moving on beyond that, in baseball news, Tanner Andrews, who was a Purdue baseball player about a decade ago, actually made his major league debut for the Toronto Blue Jays on Monday in the 9th inning. I think he had a 1-2-3 inning, so did a pretty good job. So congratulations to him, and always cool to see an athlete not from football or basketball make it to the big leagues in their sport. And then apart from that, we have some football schedule updates as well. We have times and dates for the first 3 games of the season. Indiana State is actually going to be a Friday night game, which is going to be pretty cool, September 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then we have Wake Forest, which is Saturday, September 12th at noon, so a classic kickoff time there. And then we have a really interesting one that just goes to show how great all of these West Coast teams in the Big Ten have been so far. UCLA, Saturday, September 19th, but it might as well be Saturday, September 20th because it starts at 11 p.m. Eastern, which is crazy. Obviously at the
Yeah.
Rose Bowl, but I don't know about the scheduling stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about it 100% because I mean, I don't know how important scheduling is in the first place, but a good point I saw someone make is we're basically going to UCLA across the country, gonna have to play a late game that they're gonna benefit from clearly. Then we have to come back and we're gonna play Notre Dame 6 days later, essentially at home, which is gonna be a home game, but you can't have that happen. That's just not good at all, especially for a team that probably needs every advantage it can have. And then also Indiana State, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be our first, but we'll end up having 2 Friday night games, I'm pretty sure, because I think Minnesota is also a Friday night game. So I don't know if usually the premier teams play on Friday night. Maybe they're trying to highlight Purdue some more. Maybe that's a good sign for the season, but it's interesting. I mean, obviously, I don't know how important the schedule is for the team as a whole. I think the Wake Forest one being at noon's perfect. I think Ross State will be great for that, but the UCLA one's so disappointing.
Yeah, no, that UCLA one's going to be interesting. It's going to be I'm curious how I'm going to go about that. Like, what do we
Yeah.
do during the day while we're waiting for that game? And then after that game, are we going to record like a 3 a.m. podcast? Are we going to be in a
Yeah.
state where we can do that? I don't even know.
That almost seems like a get up really early, watch all the really good games that happen at like noon, and then either crash or try and do something until 11 p.m. And then, yes, go the whole game. And then, I don't know, depending on the game, if we win, emergency pod. If we lose, maybe get an early Sunday pod going.
Yeah. Well, no, because if we win, then we can say Purdue wins Rose Bowl. You just don't mention whether it's like the
Yeah.
actual Rose Bowl, just say Rose Bowl, and then we get the clickbait, and it's easy.
And they
But
can be as good as that Drew Brees team, actually better because we won. So.
oh, yeah, the how was that going to be 2051 anniversary team of the 2026 Purdue Boilermakers when we also go winless in conference. It's going to be a great one. But besides that, that's kind of it for recent Purdue news as of right now. We're going to take a quick break and then we will get into some Purdue basketball schedule updates. So for Purdue basketball in 2025, we do have some schedule updates. Purdue has their official early season multi-team event tournament scheduled. It's going to be the Fort Myers tip-off tourney. So kind of a little bit of how this tournament's set up. So there's 2 divisions. There's the Beach Division and the Palm Division. We're in the Beach Division. Seems like there's been some good teams there recently. Last year, Michigan State won the Beach Division, so that's kind of cool. And then this year, on November 24th, we're going to play DePaul. And then on November 26th, which is Thanksgiving, actually, we're going to play Oklahoma. So some interesting matchups there, some teams that we don't play a whole lot. DePaul, obviously, the Chicago connection is pretty cool. I'm sure there's obviously won't be in Chicago or West Lafayette, but there's probably some good crossover there with alumni. And then with Oklahoma, obviously former Big 12, now SEC. So really interesting and cool, kind of cool that we get to play them.
Yeah, I agree. I saw some people commenting about how it's stupid that we have a Chicago team, an Indiana team, and Oklahoma all playing in the Fort Myers tournament. But that's how these tournaments always work. I mean, it's nothing. It's a vacation for the players, if anything.
Yeah.
Especially for Purdue. Looking back at its last season, DePaul went 16-16. I think Oklahoma went 21-16. So these are teams we should be expecting to be. Obviously, Purdue's kind of going to be in the lower 20s or in the 20s ranked probably next year. So we're not a powerhouse as we were last year, but these are games you should be expected to win. I'm not, especially once we get into later our history and how good we've been in these multi-team tournaments. This is kind of a good, I think, starter for us to show again how good we are and how good of a program we are. Because I mean, historically, we're just so good out of conference. I mean, this really shouldn't be a huge fear on our radar, I guess.
Yeah, in terms of non-conference games going into this upcoming season, sometimes, and we'll go over this later, sometimes those non-conference games are in these early season tournaments. Last year, Texas Tech was pretty good going in. The 2 years prior to that, you had Tennessee and Marquette in one of the tournaments that we played in, so those were always tough games. This year, you look at our non-conference games that are going to be pretty challenging. Again, you have Tennessee, but that's just a normal game at Mackey, I believe. And then Gonzaga, I believe we play them in Vegas. So another neutral site game, but not actually a part of any tournaments. One thing I was kind of curious, though, it seems for this one, it's a tournament, but it seems that it's not where you play the winner of the other game and then you play the loser of the other game. It seems like it's already pre-scheduled, and then whichever team, I guess, just goes undefeated wins. So kind of interesting in that way.
Yeah, I kind of just did some brief internet research, but it seems like so Pitt is the other team playing it. So the 4 teams are DePaul, Purdue, Oklahoma, and Pitt. And maybe I guess the thought is just have the marquee matchup, which would be Oklahoma and Purdue, be on Thanksgiving. I guess both games are on Thanksgiving, but obviously the highlight matchup there is Purdue, Oklahoma. I don't know why you don't just have the winner of Oklahoma, Pitt, play winner of Purdue, DePaul. Maybe they're trying to avoid that matchup where it'd be a DePaul, Oklahoma, Purdue, Pitt on Thanksgiving Day, so it's a little bit less interesting. But I still feel like those matchups are all good. So it is interesting. I mean, we get into some of these other ones, and I feel like it's a lot cooler when it's a tournament format because you get the best teams, at that moment playing each other. I mean, we always joke about this, but Purdue's kind of known for being if the NCAA tournament was in November, we'd probably have 20 national titles at this point. So it is cool to see what teams kind of are able to get through these tournaments early in the season versus who does better at the end of the season.
Kind of going off that point, we can just kind of get into kind of our next segment here where we're going to take a look back at some of the past tournaments we've done since really the 2021-2022 season. And starting back in that first one we did, the Hall of Fame tip-off tournament. So kind of a stacked lineup there. You have UNC, Villanova, Purdue, and Tennessee. Again, we didn't end up playing Tennessee, but could have been another addition in that rivalry. This would have already been after the 2019 Sweet 16. So there already was history there with Purdue and Tennessee, and this could have been a new chapter there. But going into a little bit of how that tournament went, we beat number 18 UNC 93-84. Then to win it, we beat number 5 Villanova 80-74. And went in ranked number 6. We left ranked number 3. So truly a pretty impressive showing for a team that would go on that season to be ranked number 1 in the country.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one to start with this season is 2021, 2022, because it's first year after COVID. Everything was kind of weird that year. You had weird out of conference games where they were playing at weird sites. And so you look at this one as one of our first in this kind of Ivy ED era that we start to get into. And we go in and we just are the best team. Like immediately, we clearly beat UNC, who's this powerhouse of a team, blue blood. Villanova, who's been a blue blood. They've kind of fallen off in recent years, but I mean, 2010s blue blood as you can be. And so it's a really good sign, I think, to highlight how good we were in that tournament, how it kind of sets the tone for this next kind of era we have at Purdue, where we end up going 11-0 out of conference that year, even though we have some other things happen later in the season. I think it's a really good indicator. Like we have the Big Ten ACC Challenge later in the year where we beat Florida State 93-65, which is really good. And then we have the Basketball Hall of Fame Invitational, where I'm going to mention one team, NC State, who comes up a lot in these out of conference games. We beat them 82-72 in overtime. So that's 4 different kind of great Power 4 teams, I'd say, that we play out of conference in this year. And then you get into the NCAA tournament. We then play Yale in the first round, Texas, and then lose to St. Peter's, unfortunately. But it's kind of a good highlight of where we were at that time before we get into some of the other years.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what's interesting, if we had beaten St. Peter's, I'm pretty sure we would have played that UNC team again, who ended up being national championship runner-ups that year. So it's kind of interesting, and we'll get into this more with some of the other tournaments we talk about where we ended up playing those teams later in the season. But it does kind of, like you mentioned, serve as a good preview of the teams that we're going to see later on. And I think it is a benefit, as Painter talks about a lot, for Purdue to play in these tournaments before the Big Ten schedule gets going, so that by the time we're into that and you're playing for a championship in that league, you're ready to go. and the players have played high-level competition. We're not just playing mid-majors and smaller schools, and then Wisconsin comes and you're shocked at how good they are in the level and whatnot. So yeah, no, it's interesting. I did have a few notes. I went back and I watched the Purdue UNC and Purdue Villanova game. So the first thing that threw me off, Caleb First wearing number 3. I had kind of memory
Yeah,
hold that.
interesting.
Yeah, I forgot that was a thing before I guess Braden got there the next year. Ivy, we've talked about this a million times. Still haven't seen an athlete like that at Purdue since. He was absolutely incredible. Some of the things he was doing in that game. I think that you watch Edie, and he actually had a really good game against Villanova. I think he had 21 points. So you could already kind of see early on, even in his sophomore year, he was going to be really good. Watching him, you can kind of see where if someone had not watched a ton of Edie highlights, and especially like maybe his junior year before he had like truly proven himself, he does look so much less mobile. The amount of improvement that he went through from that time to his junior and senior year when he won National Player of the Year, and now obviously he's done pretty good in the NBA. It's incredible. It's like night and day. And then the last thing is Travion. I missed him. I hadn't done a lot on Travion in a while. I know we talked about him earlier in this podcast, but an underrated, I think, Purdue what if, because you always talk about the 22-23 season as, oh, what if Ivy stayed? Travion had his COVID year. What if Travion stayed? I don't know, but I won't go off on too much of a tangent on that, but just some things I saw. But yeah,
No,
it
that's
kind of,
here. I want to get
yeah.
into that a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
actually, because I feel like that's a great
Yep.
point to bring up. I mean, this is what we're doing looking back at this point. Travion's such an interesting player to me because we have not had a guy like that really since him. Like, I mean, I know it's only been 4 or so years since then, but I mean, you wouldn't really describe TKR and Travion as very similar players. And it's like, it's very interesting what if I think for him to come back, but also like how different of a player he was in a system where Ivy and Travion versus the Edie and Braden, and then I guess Braden TKR is just such an interesting continuation of. I feel like sometimes we say Matt Painter gets stuck in a system where he has like a system that he runs, but clearly we've had so many different players in just the last 6 years come through that all are pretty. We've gotten clear success from it, so it's interesting to see how it molds over the years. I feel like.
No, I agree. I think what he did that set him apart from some of the bigs that we've had after him is his playmaking. I mean, he was incredible, and we compared him to Draymond Green earlier, so the comparison's kind of there. But no, I think what Travion was able to do, and what I think would have been so interesting, maybe just to see him 1 year later with like a Fletcher Lawyer, who he could have, gotten the ball on the post and then found Fletcher on the perimeter, or found Braden on the perimeter, or even when Gillis started playing more. Obviously, Gillis started, I believe, for that team, so he was already there. But at the same time, that would have been really cool to see. And I think that, had Travion stayed and Edie's still taking that leap, and Edie's credited Travion, especially for his development early on with some tough practices. I know they used to apparently like get into it at practice, and that like made him a lot tougher. So if Travion would have stayed and we would have had the 5th year him and junior year Edie, that'd have been crazy. And I don't think we would have lost to FDU. So that's a little pretty what if there that's maybe more realistic than the Jaden Ivey one.
Yeah, I think it's a great one to bring up, and honestly, it is an interesting thing where Fletcher's kind of just like a better version of Sasha. I mean, I remember Sasha being a great 3-point shooter, but Fletcher just like kind of blows him out of the water with that. But the other thing I wanted to say is the Edie thing that you brought up. I thought was a really good point of that's kind of how we're I think getting a lot of these recruits to an extent is you see that development Edie had as he was here. It's really really big thing. I'm sure they bring up in recruiting where they're like, look at this guy we got. He came from IMG Academy, which is a great program, but it's not as if he was like hugely recruited. He's not even on our top 10 recruits of all time, and he ended up being probably one of the best college basketball players of all time. So I think it's a huge thing in recruiting, at least.
No, 100%. And even Travion, you look at Travion his freshman year, which was that Elite Eight team, compared to where he ended up as a senior, where he's gone on to have obviously didn't make the NBA, but has had a pretty successful overseas EuroLeague career. Still playing professional basketball 4 years after he graduated, which not a lot of guys can say. That's pretty impressive. So yeah, a lot of similar kind of traits there that I agree has definitely helped us going forward with that.
Yeah. So I think getting into then, we'll move on to the next season. I'm sure we'll touch on the same kind of topics as we go through it. But 2022, 2023, it's kind of different tournaments. There's a bunch of different ones to go through here, but I'll start with the Gavitt games. It's essentially just a challenge, kind of similar to the Big Ten ACC challenge, where it's Big Ten versus Big East. We beat Marquette 75-70. It's kind of one of our first meetings with Marquette, and you'll have their name come up a lot, I promise. We also have the Big Ten ACC challenge where we beat Florida State again, 79-69. And then after that, kind of didn't really continue doing the ACC challenge. But I remember it being a really interesting. I think you even mentioned how your dad used to like bring that up as like a big thing when it was Purdue Big Ten. It was like Purdue Big Ten, and then ACC, whatever team we play was kind of a big event for you guys, or not you guys, but Purdue fans.
Well, yeah, because that was one of your marquee out of conference games in the preseason. Like I knew about even when I wasn't as large of a college basketball fan before I really went to Purdue, I still knew that was a big deal. And especially sometimes the ACC Big Ten Challenge, the 2 years prior when it was Purdue, Virginia, we mentioned this on the last pod, but that was kind of a revenge game and Purdue blew out Virginia. And that was not even a very good Purdue team that ended up doing that. I know it's molded now into the ACC SEC Challenge, but yeah, definitely disappointed we don't do that anymore. And hopefully we can get back to that one of these days.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I always like stuff like that. And you kind of highlighted it earlier, and it's something to bring up as we go through this. Like, why does Purdue play so many hard teams out of conference? Because you think it's kind of the difference between college football and college basketball, where football, you basically need to be perfect, or you had to be perfect to make the playoffs, which was when they were 4, especially when they were 2. Basketball's not like that. I mean, if you make the tournament, as long as you're kind of a top 4 seed, you have a realistic chance of winning. And if you play all these teams out of conference, it makes you a lot better, presumably for the tournament. Obviously, the question there is then why does Purdue seem to have as much, which we've gotten now, but why didn't Purdue seem to have as much success playing all these hard out of conference teams, winning all these tournaments? Where was the turnoff there? I don't know. We can kind of touch on this quickly, but do you have any thoughts on like what's the difference between these multi-team events, the Big Ten playing, and then the NCAA tournament? Like, what is the reason we have such a varying level of success? It feels like.
I think I almost go too psychological on it. I think that there's such a cloud that hangs over Purdue teams when they're in the NCAA tournament. Because when you look at all the teams who haven't won a national championship yet, but have been successful in basketball, besides Purdue, is it Gonzaga who would be in that same kind of category? But even they have really had most of their success since the turn of the 21st century. So I think that for a while, there's so much pressure on every single Purdue team. And a lot of them, to your point and to their credit, have really come up and have performed well, especially since what ended up happening in the season that we're going to talk about against FDU, where Purdue's played to their seed every single time since then and has only lost to 1 seeds. So that's where it has gotten a little bit better. But I do think that in the early season tournaments, a lot of this time, especially this next one we're going to talk about, Purdue's coming in not ranked super high, and there's not a ton of buy-in because, especially nowadays, Purdue doesn't do too much of the transfer portal shenanigans. We don't previously get high-level high school recruits that would be one and dones or even two and dones, really. So Purdue doesn't always have a lot of hype going into the season. So I feel like there's not a lot of pressure there for the team to perform, and maybe that helps them do better.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there's so many ways you can go with it. Because now I'm thinking of, yeah, it used to be you get these freshmen on campus, and you play at Duke or UNC. These guys might be their 5th game when we're playing them, and yet you have guys who have been at Purdue for 3 years. So it's kind of expected that early on, maybe we have an advantage there. But the interesting part is now with the transfer portal happening so much. I mean, you get a team like Michigan where almost their entire team is completely different, and yet they dominate immediately right out of the gate. I mean, they were pretty much one of the best teams in the country right out of the gate. So it's an interesting conversation to have. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is. It's interesting to go with where the Big Ten also factors into it because you see a team like Gonzaga where they play Providence and they play Creighton, who's been good, but they're not on the level of some of the Big Ten teams. So it's interesting.
I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps Purdue when there's these fans that are making videos talking about how 2029 might be the year they win the national championship, and that season's 3 seasons away. I don't know. I feel like that might add too much of an expectation and might be looking a little bit too ahead there. I don't know.
Yeah, those guys might need to shut up a little bit. I don't know, but I could see you smirking for a little bit. I was like, all right, he's got something. I need to
I
let him
thought of
start
it. I
talking.
thought of it. I was just waiting. I was waiting to fire it off.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, we'll talk about it all season, sure, about when we go. We'll probably play a multi-team event this year and dominate it and be like, all right, well, so we're gonna win the whole thing, and then we'll look back and wonder why we didn't maybe. But the one that I think is most interesting out of all the ones we're gonna talk about is the one we're gonna get to right now, the Phil Knight tournament that we played in that year, 2022, 2023. It's two separate tournaments that was held to celebrate Phil Knight's 85th birthday. It was the Invitational and the Legacy tournaments. So we played in the Legacy, which here, I'm going to list all the names for the Legacy and then the Invitational. So we have number 8 Duke, Oregon State, Xavier, Florida, number 2 24 Purdue, West Virginia, number 6 Gonzaga, and Portland State. So you have some Oregon State, Portland State non-level, but you have Duke, Gonzaga, Purdue. Then we have the Invitational, number 1 UNC, Portland, Villanova, Iowa State, number 20 UConn, Oregon, number 12 Michigan State, and number 18 Alabama. I mean, just a ridiculous field. I don't know if you have comments on that straight out of it, but that's just, I mean, that might be the most stacked field I've ever seen.
Happy birthday, Phil Knight. I don't know. I mean, they were really going. And I like how they had Portland State in there because
Yeah,
I actually was recently listening to an audiobook of Shoe Dog, which was Phil Knight's memoir that he wrote. And he took like some like accounting classes or something at Portland State. So it's kind of cool that
that's very sick.
even, he didn't go there fully like he did Oregon and Stanford, but nice that they got the invite there.
Yeah, you get all these power teams and blue bloods, and then you get Portland, Oregon State, and Portland State all getting thrown in there. Which is, hey, if I was Phil Knight, if this was in Indiana, we're getting Ball State and Indiana State in there too. They're getting in there too. So I respect it. So obviously Purdue wins this tournament. We went 11-0 out of conference that year. Our path there was we beat West Virginia, beat number 6 Gonzaga, and we beat number 8 Duke. So great run in general. The interesting part about it that I find really cool is UConn won the other side of the tournament. So you have Purdue and UConn winning both these pretty heavily tournaments and kind of showing how the next couple of years are going to go. Obviously, UConn's had a little bit more success, but you wouldn't have expected that that's set up for the national championship last year if the two teams from that tournament won. I thought that was a really interesting fun fact.
Yeah, and UConn ended up winning the national championship that year, so kind of a precursor to that as well.
Maybe if we beat FDU, we win the national championship. You never know.
So I have one note for the West Virginia game, and I want to just kind of set the scene because this was a team that was about to be ranked number 1 in the country, and I just want to go over this lineup that was played when the game was still within reach, by the way. Purdue was up by enough to where we were probably going to win, but it was not unfeasible that West Virginia could have come back. The lineup was Brian Waddell, David Jenkins, Brandon Newman, shout out Valpo, freshman TKR, and Caleb First, which
What a squad.
in retrospective of that lineup is crazy. I mean, you have 3 guys. I guess David Jenkins finished his career at Purdue, but you have 2 guys, I guess, who didn't finish their career at Purdue. Freshman year TKR, who didn't even start, and then Caleb First, who kind of after that year ended up falling off a little bit from the rotation. So just interesting to look back at that, and you never know what Painter's going to cook up.
It's interesting to think that that was a squad that was on the floor, and you're saying like in not just garbage time, because obviously you could find some crazy garbage time stats, but Caleb First is the best player on the court for a team that at one point was probably was one of the best teams in the country. It's a very, very interesting tidbit.
So we'll be brief on this one. Obviously, looking at the last non-conference game that Purdue played that year in the round of 64 in the NCAA tournament, they lost to FDU, becoming only the second number 1 seed to ever lose to a number 16 seed. So not the ending we wanted from that year, but I say that to go into a season afterwards where kind of motivated by that loss, I feel Purdue really turned it around and continued their dominance in a tournament that somehow probably ended up being even more difficult than the Phil Knight one. So looking at the All-State Maui Invitational 40th anniversary, teams included were Chaminade, Gonzaga, Kansas, Marquette, Purdue, Syracuse, Tennessee, UCLA. even some of the schools that don't stand out there in the modern era, like maybe a Syracuse or UCLA, might be the greatest college basketball program of all time if you're counting what they did in the 60s and 70s. Syracuse won a national championship in 2003 with Carmelo Anthony, so it's they've been out of it a little bit. They made the Final Four, I believe, in 2016. So, within the last decade, that team had been pretty relevant, even if they might have fallen off. But then obviously you have the Gonzagas and Kansas and Marquette and Tennessees of the world, where it's just insane that all of those programs ended up in that tournament. So kind of running through a little bit of how that tournament went. So we beat number 11 Gonzaga 73-63 in the first game. Against number 7 Tennessee in the second game, we won 71-67. And then against number 4 Marquette, we won 78-75 in the championship. Entered ranked number 2, left ranked number 1 with probably one of the all-time resumes up to that point in college basketball history. So, yeah, I mean, tough as nails tournament, probably the hardest one that's on this list or will be on this list, but came out on top.
Great continuation. And so far, as we've said throughout this has been a 30, I guess at that point, it might have been like high 20s, but we go 11-0 out of conference this year too, if you're not counting NCAA tournament. So this is a 33-0 run that we've been on of out of conference games. I mean, that's just like, it's so weird. It's such an interesting how are we so good out of conference? And it seems like, I mean, the Big Ten's a gauntlet. I'm not going to ever act like we should go undefeated. And even the best team to probably ever do it, Michigan last year, they didn't even win every game in conference. So it just goes to show how hard the Big Ten is. But it's a great dominance. And I think Matt Perry just shows how great of a coach he is. They can get this team ready every year. Obviously, we have the dog on our back from losing to the 16th seed last year, or the year before this. But absolutely great tournament. I mean, like you said, these are presumably end up being a number 11 Gonzaga, a number 7 Tennessee, a number 4 Marquette, in a tournament that's probably a 3, 2, and a 1 seed. Like, it's ridiculous to have played all those teams at that time. Moving on from those into like the out of conference games that aren't in the tournament, we beat Xavier 83-71. We also beat Alabama for the first time 92-86. And then we beat number 1 Arizona that year 92-84 at the Indy Classic. So that's a all-time great out-of-conference run for Purdue. I mean, one is probably highlighting how great this is probably one of our best seasons of all time, honestly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think 23-24 is the best Purdue season of all time. The only one that can kind of compare would, I guess, be 68-69 when we made the national championship against UCLA. Then in 1980 when we lost in the Final Four. But I think just given the, with respect to Rick Mount and Joe Barry Carroll, Zach Edey was just incredible. And I mean, number one, it wasn't only his first National Player of the Year, it was his back-to-back National Player of the Year. Braden Smith in 10 years is already looked at as the best Purdue point guard in school history. He probably still will be at that point. Fletcher Lawyer's probably around the top 20. TKR, obviously. So many great players on that team who probably even their careers after that into the next 2 seasons, especially Braden and TKR, elevates that team in hindsight just based on what they ended up becoming and saying like, wow, those guys were playing with obviously Zach Edey and who he was. So I mean, that team was really good and unfortunately just ran into one of the best teams of all time that year, I guess.
So I'm going to go through the NCAA tournament for you that year real quick, and I have a question for you. So we beat number 16 Grambling State. We beat number 8 Utah State. Then we rematched number 5 Gonzaga. We beat number 2 Tennessee in the Elite Eight. Then in the Final Four, number 11 NC State. And finally, run into the buzzsaw that was number 1 UConn. For you, is beating number 2 Tennessee in the Elite Eight one of the best Purdue wins of all time?
I think it's the best Purdue win of all time. Because
I have to agree.
I just finally breaking that Final Four glass ceiling that had just been slammed shut over the program for 44 years at that point, since 1980. How many Elite Eights? I know there was one in the 90s. I believe 2000, we lost to Wisconsin, who was seeded lower than us. And even we were only a 5 seed. Wisconsin might have been a 6. Then you have, obviously, everyone knows the 2019 game against Virginia that we probably should have won. So being able to beat Tennessee, that is by far, even though we were the 1 seed, we were expected to come out of that region. To get that monkey off the back was fantastic. And yeah, I think it's definitely the best Purdue win of all time. The only one I guess you could say is like, well, what about NC State in the Final Four? That is the one game where, and there was a lot of narrative leading up to it where it's like only Purdue could finally get to the Final Four. And then look who's waiting for them, a double-digit seed in NC State and DJ Burns and that miracle run. But it was such a mismatch between Edie and
Yes.
Burns that obviously I was nervous going into the game. But I think of all of Purdue's large games that they've played while I've been a fan, that was the one where I was nervous, but I felt pretty confident about. And Purdue, if Purdue would have lost that, I mean, that's another 40 years, maybe 80 years this time before we're going back. So the fact that Purdue is able to not even play around with any of that double-digit seed funny business with NC State and that run, perfect. But
Yeah.
still doesn't rise quite to the Tennessee game and what that represented.
I agree, honestly. I feel like it's at the point where I felt the exact same way. I was like, okay, not to be the LeBron, I saw it coming or something, but I just feel like everybody who's following the team at that point had seen how good we've been all season. Like, it was such a mismatch. NC State, they had a great run to get there. I mean, they'd played like 11 games up to that point already that were all do or die games. So, great run for them. Not belittling them at all, but it was just Purdue. This was a Purdue team that was going to make it. Every Purdue fan will say it, but if we didn't run UConn that year, we'd probably win against every other champion for the last however many years. So, that was probably the least I was scared of. Honestly, out of all the games, obviously you would probably say Grambling State you're less scared of, but after losing to a 16 seed the year before, I'm not scared of any
Actually,
not
I
16
don't
seed.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't know. And that game, we ended up winning by like 30. But that
Yep.
game was like kind of close at the start. Like there was a point where it was, why is Purdue not running away with this?
Yes.
What's going on? I think also with the Purdue Tennessee game, circling back to that one,
Mhm.
you obviously had the teams going back and forth, but then you also had the National Player of the Year and the runner-up in National Player of the Year was Zach Edey versus Dalton Connect. So there was kind of that personal rivalry there too. A lot of the narrative of, oh, Zach's just tall, and that
Yeah.
ridiculous narrative that
Yeah.
led up to that game. And Dalton Connect's actually the best player. Dalton Connect's great, and Dalton Connect, was drafted in the first round, awesome, but he was no Zach Edey, and he was phenomenal that game. He was,
Yes.
believe me,
He
he
was.
almost pulled it out for them. But the Zach Edey block on Dalton Connect is the greatest play in Purdue March Madness history, 100%, just because of everything it represented, not only for Purdue, but also that just personal storyline within that season. It's just so perfect. It's where if someone showed you that script before the game, Purdue's going to win and Edie's going to have a block on Dalton Connect and he throws his fists and he's super hyped up and
Yeah.
like it's perfect. It's absolute cinema. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nothing you can say beyond that.
No, I completely agree. I think especially because Connect wasn't one of those guys you respected. It was like, I wish this guy was on Purdue. If he was on Purdue that year, we'd be one of the greatest team. We'd probably be the greatest team of all time. So yeah, it was no hate to him. I think that made that game so much better because it was such a elite matchup. Like, I mean, it just felt like two juggernauts going at each other. And it's kind of a personal thing. I feel like a lot of it's almost how it felt going into the Arizona game in this last season, where everybody's talking about Tennessee's, the SEC, their athletic team. You got Edie, Braden Smith kind of being the best players at Purdue. They can't compete with these guys. It's like, yeah, we can. Don't worry. We're one of those teams in the country. We beat them earlier in the year, first off, too. We can compete with anyone, and we should never get put into this conversation to be a JV or like a AAU team just because we got a bunch of not athletic guys on the team. So I feel like that was besides getting to the Final Four, it was a big monkey off the back of having to be like, all right, like we're here. We can play with anybody.
So going into the 2024-2025 season, obviously losing Zach Edey, that era kind of ends for Purdue. We're transitioning into the early Braden, Fletcher, TKR era, and we don't even know it's going to be the TKR is the third part of that era yet. So he's still kind of coming into his own. So looking at the out-of-conference games that year, so we start with playing against Yale. We beat them 92-84. We beat number 2 Alabama at Mackey. If you remember, that's the CJ Cox game early on where he just goes off. I think he has a couple 4-point plays. So incredible win to have there. But then all good things must come to an end, and our 39-game out-of-conference winning streak was finally snapped against number 15 Marquette at Marquette. But still, just I remember defensively, they just kind of overwhelmed us that game, and unfortunately did not get much better from there. Played Auburn, lost to them. Obviously, that Auburn team ended up being a Final Four team, so not much you can do. Again, I think that team was almost older on average than the Oklahoma City Thunder. So just not a good matchup for Purdue in that one. But talking about these early season tournaments, the Rady Children's Invitational, kind of a newer one, only been around since 2023. So Purdue had a rematch of the Final Four game the year prior with NC State, ended up winning that 71-61. And then against Ole Miss, shout out Miles Colvin, had a game-winning layup at the end there, and Purdue pulled it off 80-78. And the other team in that tournament, which is kind of interesting, BYU, could have had the Cannon Catchings revenge game. So some alternate history there. And then besides that, in the Indy Classic, lost to number 17 Texas A&M 66-70 in a game that's closer than I remember, to be honest. But yeah, couldn't pull it off there. Curious if you had any thoughts just based on the non-tournament out-of-conference schedule for that year.
Well, it's definitely interesting to have the first year where essentially we lose our 39-game out-of-conference win streak. Instead of it being like a doom is gloom, not a great season, we went 8-3 out of conference, and our losses are to 3 teams ranked in the top 17. So even though it was obviously demoralizing to lose those games, we still wanted a multi-team event that year. Huge thing there. And that team was always weird. I remember going into that season, I can't remember what the expectations were at the time, but it definitely felt like all right, we just got to kind of see what we got here. We'll see what happens. And then immediately we just see Braden Smith just like that guy. So I think it was about where we should be. I don't think anybody was expecting more from that out-of-conference schedule. I remember going into the Big Ten thinking, all right, we actually can be really good this year. It was kind of later in the year that we kind of fell apart, and we still ended up being a 4 seed, but it's kind of when the defense started being suspect, when you had TKR as the center and we get into that late Big Ten schedule. That's when it was like, okay, maybe the system could only hold up so well for so long. But I mean, it's all you can ask for, I think, for a team that didn't have high expectations going into the season.
No, I agree. And you mentioned we got a 4 seed. A lot of people were very shocked that we got a 4 seed that year. But one of the reasons we probably did is because we won, obviously, against a number 2 team in the country at that time in Alabama, who ended up as a 2 seed, I believe, that year anyway. And then obviously winning the Invitational as well in the tournament. So those out of conference games matter. And even though Purdue ended that season pretty poorly and didn't go very far in the Big Ten tournament, it's an entire body of work. It's not just your last 4 weeks. Poll inertia can only do so much to hurt you or help you. You got to look at the entire season as a whole. So still was kind of beneficial.
It was kind of exactly what we needed. We played number 13 High Point in the first round, beat them, and then played number 12 McNeese State in the second round. So it's 2 lower seeded teams, but I hate to say it, it's honestly exactly what we need. We made the Sweet 16. I think for that team, it was honestly kind of exactly where you wanted to be. And the huge story that actually ended up happening is that we should have beat Houston. We played number 1 Houston in the Sweet 16. We ended up losing 60-62, but we should have won that game. You have Cameron Heidi hit a huge 3 to tie it, and then reffing and whatever else happens. But I don't know how you felt after that game. Were you surprised by how good we were against Houston that year?
Yeah, because the entire narrative leading up to that game is, Purdue got lucky with its first 2-round opponents because McNeese beat Clemson, and Clemson was supposed to beat Purdue, but apparently they can't even beat the team that Purdue blew out even more than we did High Point. But yeah, no, I remember watching that game downstairs, brothers in Indianapolis, and I believed so hard after Cam hit that shot, and to not have the push off called, and to their credit, they called an excellent inbounds play where they got the layup to score, and they just did a good job. They have a great coach at Houston, but yeah, that would have been really cool, and it would have set up another Elite Eight rematch with Tennessee. So I'm just gonna say it. We're not losing to Tennessee in that Elite Eight, so maybe we just pull off a wild Final Four run in a year no one expects us to. But we were a lot closer than people would think. I think that I kind of got 2024 Final Four NC State vibes from the round of 32 McNeese game, because obviously McNeese had Aura, DJ Aura or whatever, and I feel like those gimmick teams, it's perfect for Purdue to lose to.
Mhm.
Well, I don't want to get too far ahead, but you saw with Queens and that dog and their coach wearing the sweater, and it was making me nervous. But I think maybe by finally beating like a gimmick team like McNeese was with Aura, I don't know. I think that's another kind of hurdle Purdue had to get past beyond the double-digit seed, obviously, which we had to play 2 of those in that tournament as well.
I almost think that's kind of the big takeaway, is stupid as it is to say, is that we've kind of reached that level of, we are not a team that's going to get beat at this point by the St. Peters of the world, the Doug Edwards of the world. We have a system and we have a team that seems to, at this point, be able to beat the teams you need to beat. And of course, we're going to have close games against, a Miami or a Texas to get ahead next year. But those are SEC teams. I mean, they're SEC, ACC, those are Power Four teams that are athletic. They got dudes who are high recruits. I mean, you're expecting those games to be close. Is a huge, huge relief to hopefully I'm not jinxing this for this upcoming year, have that fear off our back of the Matt Painter history of losing to these double-digit teams. And so I think if that's what we get out of these 2 years, where, I mean, great seasons and all still, even if we didn't get exactly as far as we wanted, especially the season we're going to talk about in a second, the most recent one where we kind of were the expecting team to win it all. It's a good thing to eventually only end up losing to the number 1 seed every year. I mean, I'll take that. If I have to lose a game, I'm not going to win the tournament. I'd rather be to the number 1 seed.
Yeah, we played to our seed, and that tournament ended up with all 1 seeds in the Final Four. It was the chalkiest tournament of all time. So Purdue played to their seed. There's
Yeah.
how many stats have we seen of Purdue being the one outlier of some random stupid thing like that, where, oh yeah, this is the chalkiest tournament of all time, except for when Purdue lost in the first round of that double-digit seed. So no, I do agree that we're moving into a new era where now we only lose to 1 seeds. So once we get past this,
Hey.
we may never lose again. I don't know. So
I'll take that every day. If Matt Painter can figure that out, that's all we need. But let's get into the last season, I guess. So some interesting non-tournament multi-team games we had. We beat number 8 Alabama, kind of a running history here we have now, beating Alabama. I like that. We beat them 87-80, and then unfortunately, kind of the wake-up call, kind of the, okay, maybe we're not the number 1 team in the country and we got to figure some stuff out. We lose to number 10 Iowa State 58-81 in Mackey, as demoralizing as it can get. They absolutely just were on fire. I mean, they were a great team, but it was one of those games where you're like, geez, like, I mean, I don't know how you felt afterwards, but it's one of those where this is the number 1 team in the country. I mean, we've been getting talked out all preseason about how this is the team that's gonna win.
you know how I felt. We watched it at Ale Emporium right across the street. I felt terrible. It was horrible. And that same day, later that night, IU won the Big Ten championship in football. It was probably the worst Purdue basketball day of all time. But beyond that, yeah, it was just disappointing because you had seen some of the early concerns, and we'll talk about this game coming up when we go over the Baja Mar tournament. But we really played a shaky game against Memphis, and that's when people were like, well, maybe. But then we turned it around and we beat Texas Tech by 30. So you thought, maybe Purdue's over the hump there, but Iowa State just came in and unfortunately just kind of showed that there was maybe a level that Purdue wasn't on last year.
Yeah, and, I should have mentioned that before the outer state one. That's kind of the thing that I should have mentioned with some of the we haven't really talked about some of the outer conference games like Oakland, or in other seasons we play, like Indiana State, Valpo. We haven't mentioned a lot of those because, we're expected to win those. But, it was shaky. I remember I think it was Oakland. It was pretty close for a little bit. And then I can't remember some of the other ones we had. But it was, I mean, Akron, I think you went to actually. That one was pretty good. But it was shaky. I mean, it was just such a weird, unexpected Purdue thing, because as you've heard us talk about this for the past however much time, we are a non-conference dominant team. We go into the season and we're usually the ones who are there, and we're ready to come into your house and beat you at the beginning of the season, or at a neutral site, beat you on vacation. It's interesting that, go into this season where we're supposed to be the best team we've ever had, besides, maybe an Edie year, but the highest rank we've ever had going into the season, and yet kind of don't look like ourselves. It was really weird for a team that had a lot of people coming back. I mean, Oscar Clough is the biggest transfer portal guy we got, but there's a lot of people who are coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you look at even 24-25 when we finally had the out of conference streak snapped. It wasn't snapped at Mackey Arena. It was snapped, at Marquette or in Indianapolis or, where we ended up, wherever we played Auburn. Like that, you could still kind of convince yourself if those games were in Mackey, we would have won. We just didn't have the right team to overcome not having that home court advantage. And obviously became a theme last season of our struggles at Mackey, but that Iowa State game was just such a shock that not only was it an out of conference loss, but it was at Mackey Arena. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
there were a lot of things where I loved last season and there were a lot of highs, but that was kind of what shattered the maybe too high expectations for Purdue, where it was 40-0 and undefeated in the Big Ten and national champions and things like that. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
disappointing.
And our biggest losses, besides the Iowa State one, came in the Big Ten regular season play. I mean, we have that Illinois game where they came into Mackey too, and one guy scored the highest points ever scored by an opposing player in Mackey. So it was a weird year. I mean, it's definitely not what you expect. I'm interested to see. That'll be a big storyline going into this upcoming year. How do we look as the season starts, especially losing Braden, Fletcher, and TKR, two of like the cornerstone pieces of our recent history at Purdue. But if we want to talk about the tournament real quick, we can go through. I mean, it just happened, so fresh in everyone's mind. Number 2 seed, which is probably about where we should have been. I mean, you could maybe argue if we'd won another out of conference game or a Big Ten game, it would have been higher. Could have also lost earlier in the Big Ten tournament, would have been number 3. So interesting path. We had number 15 Queens beat pretty soundly. Number 7 Miami, which is actually pretty close. Number 11 Texas, obviously TKR game winner. And then number 1 Arizona we lose to, which is it was close at halftime. Thought we had it, and then kind of just all fell apart in the second half. How'd you feel about the overall feeling once the tournament was over? Obviously, the loss hurts, but how'd you feel?
I mean, again, it was one where we played to our seed. We were the 2 seed and we made the Elite 8. And when you're the 2 seed and you go to the Elite 8, you're supposed to lose to the 1 seed. That's just kind of how it goes. And obviously, having a 7-point lead at halftime versus Arizona, I remember just thinking, like, we're actually going to do this. Like, this is Purdue's year. We're going to Indianapolis. We're going to actually pull it together. And the Big Ten tournament momentum that it gave us really mattered, and pulled it out against Texas in a game against, again, another double-digit seed, even though it's Texas. It's not the
Yeah.
double-digit seed you would normally expect. So yeah, you think you had it, but previous Purdue teams would have lost to Texas, and previous Purdue teams would have lost to Miami when CJ Cox went down. So again, it sucks and it's hard, and you want them to have already put it together, but it's not. It's baby steps, building a program that can be at the highest levels of success, which is winning national championships and making the Final Four consistently. It's super rare programs get there. And once they do, that's all you remember. And no one's talking about, people, I guess, still kind of probably talk about Virginia losing to the 16 seed, but Villanova in 2017 lost in the round of 32 to Wisconsin, and that's sandwiched in between a 2016 and 2018 national championship. So it's just what you have to do. It's what you have to get through, and you want instant gratification after your first loss, but it's usually a multi-season thing as opposed to just one season after the other. So we'll get there eventually, but I think that even though it ended up in a little bit of a disappointing matter against Arizona, positive steps and positive reinforcement that Purdue has figured out how to beat the teams they should beat in the tournament. And then you just got to hope one year you get lucky, or that you're the best team.
It is, I kind of forgot about it. I think I tried to block it out of my mind, but it probably is much more heightened of a loss considering the Final Four was in Indianapolis. It's hard to say, but that might have been one of the more crushing parts about it. Because, if it was in Philadelphia, it was like, well, this team, did an off year. It just, after being Texas with the game winner, it just felt like everything was setting up perfectly for a Purdue run. And I won't keep shoving it in everyone's face that we lost because, I'm sure every Purdue fan thinks about it every day, but it's tough. It's tough to get there. So now that we've covered all the history of the last 5 years of Purdue out of conference schedule. I'm going to give some trivia facts you can use to tell some of your friends for the total counts of teams we've played in the last 4 years. So, if you want to ever ask someone who's the number one team we played in the last 5 years out of conference, you can say, excluding tournament, it's Marquette. We're 3-1 against them. They snapped our 39 win streak, but we've pretty much been dominant over them. It's an interesting one. I've asked, I think, 3 different Purdue fans, and not one of them guessed that Marquette would have been the first one, even though obviously played them a lot. Do you wonder why that's been a connection there?
I think just the Painter Shaka Smart connection, probably. But close by, tough conference that they play in the Big East. So I guess it kind of makes sense, but you wouldn't expect like it to be, I guess, Marquette specifically. Why can't it be Creighton or even
Yeah.
UConn or Butler, which is, I guess probably hasn't had the level of success Marquette has recently, but a lot of other teams that could fill Marquette's role. So it is interesting that Marquette ends up being that team.
So we get to our next tier. So Marquette's up in there for the first tier, 4 games. Then we have our next tier, 3 games. We have NC State, where we beat them 2 times in the regular season, 1 time in the tournament. Gonzaga, 2 times in the regular season, 1 time in the tournament. Interestingly, we're going to play them in 2027 season, so they'll go up into that 1 tier. And then Alabama, who we're also 3-0 against, and all in the regular season. So I have a question for you. Out of those 3, who do you feel like you have the biggest, I guess, rivalry towards? Because when we play them all the same amount, do you feel like any difference between them?
I'd say Gonzaga. I think there was a lot of stuff that came out where allegedly Mark Few was trying to recruit Braden Smith, and there were a lot of rumors after, I guess, Smith's sophomore year, after Edie left, where, oh, is he going to go to Gonzaga? And I remember I sent in our group chat the other Braden Smith, who now plays at Notre Dame, but the other Braden Smith had entered the portal, and I think I might have gotten 1 or 2 guys, and I was super excited about that. But yeah, so I think I'd say Gonzaga because they were trying to steal Braden Smith.
Well, they're trying to steal Braden Smith, and my point was going to be they're kind of on the same level with us. You even mentioned earlier when you're talking about a team that's on the same level as Purdue is having a ton of success, but haven't really cracked that championship thing yet. It's kind of Gonzaga. I mean, Alabama, they're similar to us, but they're even newer. Kind of Nate Oates era is the only really era they've been good at basketball. So NC State has a long history. I want to say lower level, but that's probably doing disrespect to them because they've actually won a championship. But you would expect Purdue to kind of have that record against them. I think it's impressive to be 3-0 against Gonzaga in the last 5 years. I think most teams cannot say they have probably a winning record against Gonzaga. So I think it's an impressive thing to have. I would say I have that same feeling with Gonzaga as being on the same tier. And so now going into our next tier, which is kind of the teams that we played twice. I'm not going to highlight all the ones we played once, but there's 6 teams in here. We have Florida State, 2-0 in the regular season. Yale, we beat them in the regular season and the tournament, so 2-0. Texas, we beat in the tournament twice, which is kind of interesting. Random to have faced them so many times. Tennessee, regular season once and tourney once, both in the same year. And we have a home and away series starting this year. So in 2 years, they'll move up into that 1 tier as well, which I'll get into later, I feel is a good thing. Then Arizona, these are the first teams we have where we have an even record with them. We beat them in the regular season, obviously lost in the tournament, and Auburn we have a 1-1 regular season with. And so I'll go first for it, but I feel like Tennessee is probably the team I feel like I have the biggest, I don't want to say vendetta against, but I just feel like we have such an interesting rivalry with them. We've had kind of a similar rise. I think Painter's a very similar coach to, I'm blanking on his name, but their head coach. And I feel like Tennessee just has this kind of same level of success as us. They had that very similar Edie and Connect year where they had really, really great guys. And we even had a bowl game win over them, which I thought was cool, the football connection as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say Tennessee is definitely, in terms of out of conference, our largest rival at this point. I think that, like you mentioned, the multi-sport thing kind of hammers it home, but now it's gotten to the point where it's crossed generations of Purdue Tennessee teams. You have originally in the 2019, you have Carson Edwards, Purdue, and then you have Grant Williams, Tennessee, and Admiral Schofield, and then you have the obviously Edie years and the Dalton Connect years. Then now with these next couple of years where we're going to play them, hopefully we get some more tournament games against them as well. But even if we're just playing them in the regular season and home and away, it's really cool. And now CJ and Jakari and all of the newer players, Ertl, they're going to be able to have that experience against Tennessee just like the previous generations did. So it'll be kind of cool, and hopefully it can kind of continue into the future.
No, it's a great point. Like I like that. That's a great way of thinking about it, is this like era of rivalry. I mean, I hope it continues, and hopefully in football, maybe we could get on their level eventually. I don't know. I don't know about that, but that's my hope. And so, totaling everything we've done, our out of conference record in these last 5 years, 51-4. I would need to do some research, so that has to be either the best or tied for the best out of every team. And then if you include the NCAA tournament, we're 63-9, which also I would imagine, besides maybe UConn, is probably up there with one of the best. So very great era for Purdue. I mean, we obviously talked about recruiting recently, but it's a great time to be a Purdue fan, especially Matt Painter's really, I feel like, figured out his system at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you look at the time between, I believe, 2017 and that we made the Sweet 16. And before that, I think our last appearance had been 2010. And now we're looking at an era where, like you mentioned, we have an incredible out of conference record over the last 5 or 6 years. And then even in the tournament, we're going to Sweet 16s every single year since 2017, except for 2023 and 2021, but almost every single year we're going to the Sweet 16. So yeah, it's really cool. It's really interesting, and I know we complain a lot, and I'm definitely guilty of that, of wanting more, but what we're building to is special, and once it all comes together, the journey will make it all the more sweeter.
Completely agree. All right, so we'll take a quick break, and when we come back with some random updates and thoughts about Purdue and then some of the recent Indianapolis developments. All right, so the Indy 500 was this past weekend, Memorial Day weekend. It was the first time actually for both of us. Kind of a red flag for you, I want to say, because you're from Indiana. I'm originally from Philadelphia, so it says something about Ike. But is there anything that, what was your first, what were your vibes from it? What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, you mentioned I was from Indiana. I'm from Northwest Indiana, also known as the region to some,
Mm.
depending on your definition of what's included in that. But no, I think growing up, the Indy 500 just wasn't something that was really. I feel like I didn't know a lot of people who would go to it, so I never truly fully got kind of that knowledge of just how large it is. That was my biggest shock, I would say, is when they said, this is the largest sporting event in history. I guess I probably should have paid
Yeah.
attention. I don't know what I thought it was going to be instead. But yeah, I mean, just even not only the amount of people, but just the distance you have to walk to even get to like your spot. I feel like we went about 2.5 miles, probably even more, even get into where we ended up putting our chairs down. But no, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really fun. I think that, especially for like a first time, I think we did it the right way. We didn't try to go in too far and reserve a spot for tailgating and try to get all that set up while also experiencing it for the first time. But yeah, no, I had a really good time.
Yeah, you completely agree. I feel like I love a thing where everybody commits to it. It feels like when you get there, it's like, oh, this is a thing that's been going on for 100 years at this point, which it has. But everybody there is ready to have a great time. You can tell that everybody there knows what to do. It's not a new thing. It's like I felt like a part of it as soon as I was there. As much as it is kind of a funny thing to be the most popular thing, like the biggest sporting event in the country, it makes sense. It fits it. I saw one stat where it's 1 in 843 people in the US were at the Indianapolis 500, which is just absolutely ridiculous to think about. I mean, it's so cool, like to be able to go to an event like that. And then I definitely agree with you. I think the unfortunate part was the walk, and I think anybody who goes to Indy 500 will agree with that. I mean, we actually got pretty good parking luckily, but we still had to walk. I feel like a mile, maybe 2 or 3 miles just to get to where we were going, and half of that was inside of the track. So it was a lot for that. But I think the interesting part would be next year. I feel like now I could do the tailgating part. Like I almost want to like looking to get in a spot. Maybe we could get that Wash Boilers tent going. Get a little live episode going at the Indy 500 or something. But I thought it was cool. I mean, definitely a cool experience to go through. I mean, I've never been to something like the biggest things you can go to besides that are maybe like concerts or football events, right? I mean, there's nothing on that level.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I saw on Twitter all of the things where you can fit this inside the Indy 500 and also this, I'm sure some of it was joking, but I have to go back and like look at the ones that I saw because I dismissed all of them. I was like, oh my God, yeah, you're fitting that, sure. But no, I think they might have been telling the truth, which is incredible. So, see, this is where I guess I'm a bad Hoosier. And this is where not that kind of Hoosier, but
As I
as
say, you're
someone
Boilermaker.
from, I am a bad Hoosier. I guess that is a badge of honor there. But as someone from Indiana, I guess I'm a bad native Hoosier because I don't know. I feel like I just had zero idea about the Indy 500. Besides, I think it's like fourth grade is when they do the state history, and obviously we do Indiana history, but I've been missing out for 24 years. Like, what's been going on? So, yeah, it's really cool, and I definitely agree. I think next year we'll have a better plan of attack, and we can get a tailgate going, have some people stop by. That'd be pretty cool.
My hot take that I just now thought of, and they don't need more people to go to it at all. Clearly, we've talked about that enough. They don't need more people. But I think a big thing is if you go to Purdue or IU and you're from out of state, you can't really go because it's after school's out. So here's the thing. You can either move it into April, which, is a little rainy, so I don't know how risky that would be, or, move to September. You kind of do something like that. Weather's a little bit nicer too. Well, I feel like it'd be a huge Purdue thing for people to be like, all right, Indy 500 this weekend, classes, you might not even you don't have classes I guess you have to figure out what the day would be for it to work because you have it on Memorial Day. But super cool if you could get a bunch of Purdue and IU students, like even you might even get Notre Dame people, Ball State people to come down to the game. Or the Indy 500 field. It'd be such a cool event.
You could replace Grand Prix week. We already have a racing week for it. Little 5, replace that. I guess you could do it in September. You could do Labor Day, and
Mhm.
you'd still have that Monday, but then you'd be running up into college football and things like that. So
Duh.
I don't know. I don't know. The only time this really affects anything is something like last year where the Pacers were still playing in the Eastern Conference Finals on the same day. So I think that would have been cool. That would have been cool to do the double
Yeah.
header, but yeah, you'll have to wait until 2034 because the Pacers only make the Eastern Conference Finals every 10 years, and I guess maybe 1 year after as well with last year too. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm
every
not
4
going to do your
years.
thing of looking that far ahead. I'm not going to do the Ike look at 3 years and 10 years ahead.
The 2029 Indy 500 Wash Boilers tailgate is going to be insane. We're going to be celebrating a Purdue national championship, so that's going to be like crazy. The Grand Marshal is going to be Matt Painter. It's going to be insane.
I'm there for it, man. I'm ready. I want to be there now.
Cool. Well, kind of with that, I think that we can go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Wash Boilers. If you have any ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to cover, definitely leave it down in the comment section below. Besides that, you can follow us at Wash Boilers on Twitter, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. Thank you guys for watching and have a great rest of your week.
Yep. See you next time.